The attorney's perspective is one that we are all familiar with. But when we consider crime and violence, we must consider the economy. And in Tobago, when we speak economy, we speak tourism. We had the opportunity to speak with a renowned economist, Dr. Vanish James, who gives us his professional perspective on the relationship between the economy and crime and violence.
Well, first of all, the impact of the significance of crime, the trends I see a clear upward trend in your data for all crimes. As I said, I have not broken it up into the different types of crimes as yet, but we do know what's happening on some of those fronts. We know, for example, murders increased significantly in the last couple of years. And so that's your state of crime. It's getting worse in a society that is ill-equipped to cope with a lot of crime. You know, Tobago is a very open society. People still even sleep with their windows and doors open. So we're very vulnerable, and therefore there is clearly a concern we all would and should have about escalating crime.
Yes.
Now, if you want to measure the impact on the economy, the best measure, since it's our only way to earn international income now, you look at the impact on international arrivals to Tobago. Don't look at the arrivals on the boats and the planes, the domestic arrivals, because they themselves may bring crime. So we won't look there. We look at the international arrivals to sort out the effects that we really want to look for. And what you notice is that there's been a clear downward trend in international tourism arrivals, international visitor arrivals to Tobago. Since 2008, I have data from you for crime for 2008 to now, monthly data, and I have international tourism arrivals data, monthly data as well, and both show distinct trends. One is upward movement in the crime, the other is downward movement in the international tourism arrivals. What you would normally do as an economist is you do two things. First, you look at the correlation, how they move together between the crime level and the tourism arrivals. And when we do that, we see a clear inverse relationship, that there is a tendency for rise in crime to be associated with fall in tourism arrivals. Secondly, what we would do is look at the rate of change, or if you like, the change in crime and the change in international arrivals. And when we do that, again we see that those two things are inversely correlated. That is to say, a rise in crime of some percentage seems to be associated with a fall in tourism arrivals meaningfully. So I took that and began to study that with proper statistical software and ran what we would call a regression analysis, right? After carefully accounting for this, what we call this, the quality, the stationarity in the data. We have to fix up the data so we could get good analysis with it rather than spurious analysis, right? And when we do that, we have clear indications of what's really happening. And the answer that I get when I run the analysis is all very significant answers. That a 1%, let's do it on the 2% basis. If crime increases by 2% in Tobago, it will drive down tourism arrivals by 1%. This is monthly data now.
So how significant is that an impact on?
Well, that's huge. I mean, we already have a very, very low level of international arrivals. You're talking about, it hit rock bottom at 1747 last November. 1741 persons came as international tourists, coming and staying for a day or so. And so what you're seeing here is that you don't have a large number to play with. And if you allow crime to keep growing 2% per month, 2% per year or whatever, over whatever time period you look, if you increased it by 2% next year, tourism arrivals will fall by 1%. So you could see what that means. I mean, you don't have much to begin with. A 1% reduction in international tourism arrivals is quite significant.
So for the average person to understand what you're talking about here, what is the impact on life therefore?
Well, it may not affect the daily life, because we don't live by tourism in Tobago. It will affect, of course, the tourist centers. It will affect things like your hotel plans. It will affect your hotels and guest houses. And they are already saying that this is happening to them. But what it's also doing, well, you know, we compensate for that by living on oil and gas, which is now in crisis. What it's also doing, though, is that it's demonstrating for you that you are losing your capability to contribute to the national economy. And from the standpoint of Tobago, you know, for a long time we've been trying to say we want to care for ourselves and so on. So this is not good news by any means. That's the first thing. It also puts at risk the people who work in tourism. So the owners are going to be at greater risk if crime keeps escalating, the owners in the sector. But persons working in the sector will come under threat, and therefore what will they do?
This brings us to the end of our first episode of Tobago CSI, Chatting Safety Issues.
In this episode, we had an opportunity to examine the crime and violence situation in Tobago. We chatted with the agencies charged in responding, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Citizen Security Program. We heard the legal point of views and the views of the average citizens of Tobago.
In our next episode, we will be looking at burglaries and break-ins.
I am Anne-Marie Degazo.
And I am Atto Augustine.
And you've been watching Tobago CSI.